All right. Now they can hear us. All right. So anytime there's like a Windows update or something, it messes with my my settings in Streamlabs. So yeah. So I was actually speaking, and then I noticed that they can't hear us. So Logic, quick sound check. Can we hear you? That's.
I don't know, man. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. Yep. All right. Yeah. So yeah. Sorry about that, everyone. So yeah, every time there's like a Windows update for some reason, it changes my settings in Streamlabs. So yeah, and so I have to go back and reset everything, and I just did that quickly. So welcome to BRAP, everyone. It's a Sunday morning. It's a coffee rant. This is what I'm calling. I'm calling it the coffee rant. Yeah, I was going to do a BRAP rant last night, and then I was like, you know what? I really want to play video games instead. I podcasted on Friday with the Mooch on his channel with Crossfire. Crossfire was a little spicy. I think you were in that live chat game, Logic, so you could probably back me up there with some of the conversation that was happening there in the live chat. So it's kind of interesting. But I did want to do kind of a continuation of some of the conversation or discussion that's happening right now, revolving around Microsoft calling out Sony shady business practices, and how people are kind of running angrily about about this, what kind of Microsoft highlighted, and some of the takes that I'm seeing. It really kind of just reinforced that a lot of what we're seeing isn't really out of the ordinary per se, but Game Logic, I meant to say good morning to you, sir. So I'm gonna raise my cup of coffee here and say cheers.
Hey, thanks, man. I'm doing all right. The wife ran out and got Starbucks this morning, so I'm actually being treated a little bit with some not my normal coffee. Now I don't know if I didn't check to see if this. I always, whenever I go to Starbucks, I have to get the extra shot of espresso. So I don't know if she got that, so I'll have to check that out. Otherwise, we might be a little underpowered this morning.
you got the good old red eye.
Right,
the shot of espresso. I remember. Oh man, when I used to, in my 20s, when I would go out for a rough night, go to Starbucks and get a red eye. But I'm just having I have a Keurig machine, so I just put the pot in and just make my coffee that way. So I actually was going to go to Starbucks and just ran out of time.
We gotta get you to flip over to the French press, man. The Keurig is it's a nice bougie appliance, but it really doesn't put that hair on your chest.
No, I hear you, man. It's convenient, but yeah, you're right.
It is.
It doesn't put that hair in your chest, man.
That's a very good aspect that I think we're going to get into today. Is a little bit of the time value of opportunity costs and convenience.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's something to be said for that. But, people forget that exists in the world of video games. Just like people forget that the way these companies behave aren't any different than, let's say, other companies and other verticals behave too. Like they all spend money to compete, to outmaneuver one another, to talk shit about one another to regulatory agencies. If you would have heard, and I don't remember all the specific details to the Epic and Apple litigation. They're back and forth, but that was kind of interesting. Right, the way Apple was kind of painting Epic was like, Epic, they're like they're the bad guys, and vice versa for Apple.
Right, so. And same for the Apple Samsung litigation was very eye opening to kind of see how those things go down. Google Sun, Google Apple. I mean, all of these types of things. Kind of always surface right how these things actually work, and if you really pay attention and you really study and you really keep track of it, like that Apple Samsung lawsuit, I studied that very closely and kept up with it very closely, and it dragged on for a very, very, very long time. But it was incredibly illuminating and a great educational opportunity, right, to kind of understand, that's where I kind of really nailed down my understanding of kind of, antitrust and anti-competitive laws and how judges look at them. And the other thing that's kind of interesting, we won't get so much into this today, but just as we're talking about this, as we kind of continually have to talk about it, because like every other day there's just a horrid take. I'm
sorry, Logic, I don't mean to interrupt, but just for those, because people may not remember or may not be aware of the Apple. Some of the listeners, at least, may not be aware of the Apple lawsuit with Samsung. Basically, Apple sued Samsung 11 years ago for a patent infringement, alleging that basically Samsung had copied the iPhone's design with its own Galaxy line of smartphones. Apple, I think, was awarded about $1 billion in damages.
They were originally awarded $1 billion, and then after multiple back and forth appeals, I think it eventually got down to about 549 million that Samsung eventually paid. Right, which is really a pittance when you really talk about the colossal size of these companies, and it was very much, as is definitely referential to today, it was very much a matter of a war of words, a war of pop culture influence, a war of perception, image, and exposure, as I often like to refer to work, and not really about the brass tacks, right, of the money, but also in order to influence behaviors on the market, right, in order to kind of influence Samsung to kind of go down some paths of design that kind of deliberately swerved away from the iPhone so that there would be greater product differentiation on the market, all of which was beneficial to consumers at the end of the day.
Yeah. And this was really a war of words. I mean, I think actually I just did a quick Google search and it looks like Apple's still actually at it. Like they're still like, let me pull up this article here. Looks like this is Android Authority. I can't even talk today. Android Authority says, this is the headline, Apple exec gets nasty, says Samsung ripped off our technology. They took innovations that we had created and created a poor copy of it and just put a bigger screen around it. I don't know I'm just reading the title here. I'm not going to get into the meat of the article. But
you even go to the Steve Jobs quote, right? Which is, we're going to go thermonuclear war on Android, right? Which is what kind of kicked this whole thing off. So like it's, we read, again, we've been reading into a lot of the responses to the Brazilian commission, a lot of, what Microsoft wrote to the New Zealand commission, and people have stood on these things as if they are truisms and they are somehow revealing of like the emotional and psychological state of white collar college educated executives who make six-figure salaries 2, 3, and 3 times over, as if they are sweating and going to therapy and having nightmares at night, right? Because Microsoft is buying Activision, and I'm like, that's just not what happens, right? You come into the boardroom, you hear the news. There's a brief amount of like, oh crap, a brief amount of kind of swallowing, mainly because nobody knows who's going to get the football, right? Nobody knows who's going to get spooled up and who's going to have to work weekends and work overtime, who's, not going home promptly at, 5 o'clock or whatever. But once all that kind of settles and these task forces get spooled up and, the talent is kind of identified who's going to lead the charge on this stuff, it's time to just roll up your sleeves, square your shoulders, and get the work done. And I've been involved in things like this. I've had to write papers in response to regulatory commissions in certain markets. I've definitely had to write, droves of white papers and things to influence government officials, right, to make certain decisions. And it's just work. It's just business. It's what they were trained and educated to do. It's what the basis of their hire was on. It was how they were vetted, whether or not they would be suitable for a position like that. And these are just things that happen.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of like, it's interesting. Like on BRAP this past Wednesday, we basically were like, hey, this is kind of a nothing burger, and people in the live, and not in the live. Well, there may be some people in the live chat, but some of the responses that I saw to that show, it was like, oh, you guys are trying to downplay this. Well, no, it's not. We're not downplaying anything. We're basically saying, when we say nothing burger, it's to say what you just said, Game Logic, that this is business. Responding to questionnaires from regulatory agencies is really just part of the process. Sony isn't scared. They're not shaking in their boots. People aren't running around the PlayStation headquarters like chickens with their heads cut off, which I think you said on Wednesday, Game Logic. I hope I'm quoting you correctly, but I mean, obviously, are they aware of what this acquisition means to them in terms of marketing deals? Absolutely. Are they probably thrilled about losing marketing deals? Probably not, right? But they're also moving forward with figuring out, what content they want to put out, looking at maybe potential acquisitions. I mean, this isn't anything that is, again, because there's that narrative that they're scared and, they know they're going to lose a bunch of money, and this is why they're replying the way they are. Yeah, and again, I'm sure they're keenly aware of the marketing deal and the impact of that, but this is just part of the process. Again, answering to a consumer or a regulatory body, trying to influence outcome and decisions that benefit them. This isn't any different than what any other company does, than what Apple and Epic were trying to do, what Samsung was trying to do with Apple, what Apple was trying to do with Samsung. Again, I brought up that article with Apple trying to influence behaviors again, saying, look, you have somebody at Apple saying, and I got to find out who it is. Hold on a second. There's an Apple executive here, Greg Jaswiak. He was asked about Samsung's competitive products, how they affected Apple in the early days of iPhone. And he said, look, this is a cheap, it's a ripoff of the iPhone. He's saying this publicly, but why is he saying this publicly? Game Logic, like imagine if Phil Spencer had come out and said, hey, PlayStation Plus is a ripoff of Game Pass. Like, people, oh my God, he's calling him out. No, isn't this part of one kind of, as an employee of Apple, he's marketing his brand. He's trying to influence consumer behavior, right?
Right. It's winning of hearts and minds. And I mean, and another thing, two things that people have really not keyed on in these conversations, right, is but also like super understand, like really focus and really understand that. Notice that everybody and their mother who has a Twitter account, right, who's a Sony employee, right, because we see and we hear from devs and stuff, they're not talking about this on Twitter, right? Because I guarantee you that they've been given a strangle order, right? And I guarantee you that given that these are legal proceedings, right, or are going to proceed towards legal proceedings with legal ramifications, right, that as has always been stated, in fact, a lot of times I don't understand why the devs and some of the employees talk on Twitter at all, right?
By the way, God bless Michael Mumbauer for engaging with somebody who thought they knew better than him.
Right.
I mean, like gaming Twitter. Let's do a little bit. Like let's do better here. Like, and not everyone does this, but I literally saw someone. And Michael Mumbauer is a game developer. He worked for Sony for many, many, many years, and actually has inside knowledge into the Last of Us remake and what went into that remake. And he's trying to explain to them how this isn't just a copy and paste job on the Last of Us remake. And people are like, no, that's not true. No. It's like, you guys are arguing with a developer and you have no development experience. This is where we're at today, by the way. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Game Logic.
Right. No.
It's maddening.
Yeah, but understand and look at who's responding, right? Because, I mean, it's the normal course of business, right? That only certain people are authorized to talk to the press, right? And to speak on the corporation's behalf. And we are given specific guidance, right? For instance, that like if you are queried by the press, right, refer them to one of these people who are officially identified. And so that's a little bit of what you're seeing now, right? Only certain people are allowed to talk about this. But the other thing that's not being brought into the conversation is we're going way high and right, about what was written to the Brazilian Commission and what was written in New Zealand, right? These are scrimmage games. These are warm-ups. This is people warming up in the bullpen, right? This is not the big show. The big show is when they get in front of the FTC, right? And in front of the European Union, right? So all of these, so in some cases, right, a lot of these are also kind of testing the waters, right? Seeing which arguments work, seeing which arguments play, seeing which arguments don't gain traction, right? And things of that nature, right? This is, I mean, it's not a super long marathon, right? We should see this kind of culminate, right, as we head into 2023. But at the end of the day, right, this is a series of games in a season. This isn't just, all in, one shot deal kind of thing that they're going through.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it's kind of it's a precursor to what you just said, sitting in front of the FTC and kind of pleading your case with them. When they get in front of the FTC, they're not gonna fill out a questionnaire and send it in, right?
No,
they're not. They're not. Yeah, they're not. Yeah, it's not just. It's and we know it's hunting season right now on Capitol Hill for tech companies. So
Very true. And
Yeah.
let me comment on that point too, right? Because we've had a lot of people go, oh, it's not that big a deal. They're going to pass it through. Again, I don't think this comment was made maliciously, but it was one of the comments right on one of our shows that these people don't really care about gaming, right? Understand that part of the dynamic on Capitol Hill, and you're going to see it. Actually, I'm kind of waiting for a litmus test to kind of see how the FTC and the FTC Chair Khan deal with Facebook in their attempt to acquire the developers of, I think the VR game is called Supernatural, right?
Mm-hmm.
Part of the feeling on the Hill is that people are unhappy that nothing really happened when Facebook bought Instagram, right? That nothing really happened when Facebook bought WhatsApp, right? And that the outcome of that, right, has been the need to exercise far more oversight, right, than the government would have preferred. There's a lot of kind of regret, and what there's the potential for you to see is a lot of kind of rubber banding, right, where due to dissatisfaction of how the antitrust division kind of participated in those deals, right, that and even the Warner Brothers Discovery deal, right, which started in the last administration, I want to say. I'm not absolutely positive, but there's a lot of dissatisfaction about what feels like there was some inaction, right, particularly during the regime of I can't remember the last guy's name, but the Trump appointed, Trump aligned FTC chair, right,
and
so
the guy from yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah, I mean, so not only has Khan been kind of raised in this wool, right, of where, she's got the bridle in, she's chomping at the bit, right? She's got it in her teeth to go after big tech, right? And Microsoft falls in that realm of kind of these 4 or 5 big companies. But I mean, it's going to be hunting season, and that kind of regret factor is definitely gonna feed into it.
Yeah, and Lena Khan, by the way, is actually also looking into with as we're talking about big tech. She's looking to crack down on what she calls their obsession with user data, or the FTC's refer this to as commercial surveillance. So, and that's really data collecting of people's personal information, things like that. So, there's going to be a public forum on this September 8th at 2 p.m. And yeah, so it really is. They really have their eyes. They're under a microscope, but I say they have been talking about big tech.
Right. So, and just to pull that lead all the way through, right. That particular notion, right, ad tech, and other things that figure into how data is pulled across mobile phones. That's going to figure into the mobile component of this deal, right? Because now as you have telemetry that's going to be potentially coming back to Microsoft for all these mobile phones that King applications are installed on, right? That creates a concern. Let me figure out a very careful way to say this. That creates a concern that may be both advantageous and disadvantageous, right, within government circles, within the antitrust division, but also extending to concerns outside of it, right? Because again, that's going to invoke the topic of data on coming back from mobile phones, both in the United States and in overseas markets, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you think about the way a lot of things have gone down, where people have used mobile phones and they use a lot of these applications for things like exercising political discontent, for coordinating, anti-regime, anti-government activities right outside the country in Egypt and other places like that, where some of those things have been used as the circle of communications for civil disobedience or just outright insurrections and efforts to overthrow governments. Right?
January 6th.
Right. So that type of thing is gonna feed into how far we want to allow Microsoft to proceed down the trail. Again, Microsoft, a company which has an incredibly large footprint, right, in government contracting.
Yeah, no, they do. Yeah. So yeah, again, these, seeing some of the reaction and commentary on, what Microsoft referred to as, Sony blocking, and this is their response to the Brazilian regulatory agency, is Sony blocking games from going to Game Pass. People were upset, and I've been gaming for 40 years, and the idea of one platform withholding content from another isn't new to me. It shouldn't be new to anyone. I mean, we have seen this. Even if you just started gaming last console generation or this console generation, you've seen this. You've seen companies broker deals with developers. You know what's funny? People are so hyper-focused on Sony or Microsoft for money hatting deals or games, but no one ever talks about the developer or the publisher. Like, it's a deal between two parties. So what I don't understand is the outrage in this particular case at Sony when they're making deals with publishers. Publishers are going into these deals. They're saying, wait a minute. Yeah, you know what? We like this deal. It makes sense for us. Sony, we are going to enter this deal with you. We like what you propose. It's a win-win for us. We're going to do this. And that's the part that really, to me, is kind of why that's the part to me that I don't understand why people are just glancing over that fact that this isn't just Sony making the deals. The publishers are making these deals, and they're making them with either Sony or Microsoft. There was an article by Imran Khan that was written, I think, about the start of this console generation, where he was informed that in some instances, Sony was actually outbidding Microsoft for third-party deals. And Microsoft, if you listen to certain people, that Microsoft is this $1 trillion company, and that's why Sony is quote unquote scared of them, because they have a lot of money. And as my good buddy Eric Jackson says, how does a broke company beat out the rich company? But why is it, Game Logic, that people are glancing over that fact that it's not just there are two parties involved here, and people are just glancing over that fact? I could probably answer my own question, but I just want to get your thoughts on that.
No, yeah, and sorry, I was looking at some Nintendo Sega stuff from a historical perspective, but it's the same thing that I mentioned to you.
Which we're going to talk about, by the way, because apparently this is news to me. Sony is the sole reason why Sega is no longer making consoles because of their dirty practices.
It's like I said to you this morning, right? We kind of had the same thing when Epic was signing, which it still does, right? Developers to exclusive deals. We got a lot of haterade from Steam evangelists who felt that it was, an unfair or dirty practice, and I get it. At the end of the day, there's a school of thought that hates exclusivity, right? And I get that. And I have a good friend, right, who feels that no game should be exclusive. And, I agree with kind of the altruism of that, right? I always, ask people to pump the brakes, short of the notion of first party, because at the end of the day, there's no point at which it kind of economically makes sense for me to pony up the bill, right, full stop, right, from beginning to end, to develop a game to deploy, right, on another competitor's platform, right? It just doesn't make sense when we're talking about original IP. So I understand that, but when Epic was kind of locking people down to exclusivity, all the haterade was thrown at Epic, and I'm like, you do understand that there's a reason that the deal gets traction, right? Because it does a positive for the developer, just like we talk about the deals for Game Pass, right? It's the same effect, right? The fact of the matter is that there's an amount of risk that's involved with investing in creating and deploying a new game. You don't know that it's going to sell. And so some percentage, right, of whatever projection you're making, whatever guess you're making on how much the game is going to earn, right, is at risk of never being realized. And so making an exclusive deal with Epic, putting a game in Game Pass gets you a guaranteed paycheck, right? Mm-hmm. Lots of people like working lots of different ways. I personally like working a job where I know how much I'm going to get paid every 2 weeks. That's just me personally. I'm very averse to working jobs where, right? It's highly variable what I'm going to get paid, right? Some people, right? Full-time YouTubers, right? Content creators, entertainers, whatever, right? Entertainers who have yet to make it big. People out working as waiters and waitresses in Hollywood, waiting to make it big, right? Those people are okay working on a variable income, right? I'm not. Some developers, right? Yeah, oh, exactly. People working on commission. Some developers, right, feel the same way, right? Sure, they've spent some money working towards, a variable outcome, but they would like that to be shorn up with a little bit of more of a guarantee. That's what putting a game in Game Pass and, doing those deals with Epic would do. And again, but all the hate gets leveraged at Epic, right? It doesn't get leveraged at like the developer, right, or the publisher who actually makes those deals.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Rude, I'm not saying the deal shouldn't happen. I'm not trying to give reasons why deals shouldn't happen. I'm just telling you, I'm just discussing kind of the fact that these things happen because they're basically companies trying to, they're posturing, they're jockeying back and forth. And that's kind of why we discussed the Apple Samsung lawsuit in the beginning of the show as an example of that.
Right. I mean, as I mentioned in the spaces, I guess earlier last week, I don't think in any way that like the deal is just not going to happen and Microsoft is going to have to pay Activision whatever the goodbye kiss payment is, like $5 billion or something like that. Mm-hmm. I don't think in any way that that's going to happen, right? But I definitely think that there is a heavy likelihood, right, for some restructuring to either be mandated. One of the other things I think that often doesn't get discussed is many times corporations will restructure these deals before they get in front of the FTC, right? Or they will have conversations with the FTC that, hey, we're planning on doing a thing that takes X off the table, so you don't need to worry about that, right? So I heavily suspect that things like that will happen. I guess, eventually we'll get into a little bit of kind of market share and the position that Call of Duty plays on the market. But, I definitely think it's highly possible that that some type of licensing or marketing constraints will be put around Call of Duty if that's included as part of the package. But also, right, that these discussions that Activision had already been having, that they were planning on changing the delivery model and the content creation model and the production model of Call of Duty also may play into it, right? Where it changes the landscape of what the overall value of that property is, depending on how they deploy it each year. Yeah,
I think Rudace is referring to also, I'm just reading his, he's referring to Colin Moriarty, who, and I haven't listened to this, to Colin's take just yet. I'm a little behind on my, I'm actually a Patreon supporter of Colin's show. Do listen to him. I'm actually a little behind. Am I listening to some of his content he's put out? But I think what Rude Days is saying here is that he's saying Colin's response wasn't the best. I think Colin is saying that it's sort of hypocritical and easy to shoot down. So I'd have to go back and listen to Colin's take on Sony's response. But again, I mean, I wouldn't expect, whether or not that was the best response from Sony, maybe that we can have that conversation. But again, I wouldn't expect anything less from them either. Just like I wouldn't expect anything less from Microsoft. If we're going to talk about not the best response and easy to shoot down, Microsoft's response to the New Zealand regulatory agency downplaying Call of Duty, saying, again, I'm paraphrasing, basically insinuating it's not that big of a deal. Again, I wouldn't expect. I guess what I'm saying is, from what I've read, I wouldn't expect to see. I'm not surprised by those responses from either Sony or Microsoft, is what I'm trying to say. Whether that's the best course of action from them, maybe not. I guess my point is, I'm just not surprised by the responses. So
yeah, and it's kind of lends to what I said, right? That these are warm up rounds, right? And so if Sony's response wasn't the best, I mean, I'm certain there's a way that could be decomposed, right? To arrive at that conclusion, right? That's kind of, again, why you have several rounds to kind of sharpen the pencil before the big shows. T-Rock, pointed out, as we did earlier this week, when Disney bought Fox, they didn't buy the entire thing. And Slow-Mo had mentioned that, they didn't want Fox News, right? But he also mentioned, right, the negotiation tactics, right, that you take.
They couldn't get Fox Sports and stuff. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
Yeah, no, and I was thinking this morning about, this is the same way that I approach, right, selling a house, right? That a lot of times there's things that I don't care about that I easily quickly make concessions for, or that I leave on the table as if they are a big deal for me, because in the back of my head I'm like, yeah, I'll capitulate on that when I get around, when we get down to that, things I don't maybe reveal up front because I figure they're going to come out right during the home inspection, things like that. So yeah, I completely agree with that point about Disney and Fox, right? Comcast, NBC Universal, right, did the same thing. They figured out concessions that they were going to make, some before they got in front of the antitrust division, and then some additional ones that they were forced to make in order to allow the deal to pass through. And you got a super chat.
Yeah, I got to get that super chat from our buddy Chrono here in a second. Rude Day says, go back and listen to what Colin is basically saying is Microsoft lawyers slap Sony's lawyers down. I mean, I guess. I mean, I don't look at this from a WWE lens. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not looking at this like, oh, who slapped who down? Like I don't know. I don't look at it from that perspective. Maybe Colin does. I don't know. I mean, sure. Do lawyers outmaneuver one another? Absolutely. Maybe Microsoft's lawyers did in this case, but to me, I think what you're saying, Game Logic, and maybe Microsoft's lawyers did outmaneuver Sony's lawyers, but like this is, like you said, the warm up round, and no one, and I don't expect this deal not to go through, and just like I don't expect Sony not to, kind of put their 2 cents into the mix and try to influence decisions that benefit them as a company. I mean, again, this is what companies do. God, I keep thinking about that epic Apple lawsuit. That was very insightful, by the way. The way those two companies were talking about each other, it's, Tim Sweeney out. I mean, Tim Sweeney was throwing lots of shade, by the way, at Apple. But would you expect anything different from Tim Sweeney? Probably not, right? Anyhow, let me get the super chat from Chrono, our good buddy Chrono with the devil numbers. Just hopped on, so not sure if, with the $5 super chat, by the way, thank you. Just hopped on, so not sure if reference yet. Nintendo put money to get Bayonetta 2 made. Sony put money to help Street Fighter 5 to exist. That is a great point, yeah, and that's, this goes back to some of those, I'm assuming you're referring to kind of the deals that happened between, kind of like the platform holders and developer publishers. So these deals do happen, and there's a benefit, like, Street Fighter 5 was exclusive on PlayStation, but they also had. But for Capcom got the benefit to Capcom was that Sony put money in to help make the game. So,
right, and I'm glad Chrono invoked the name of Nintendo, right? Because just to go back on that, right?
Yes.
The whole notion of exclusivity, right, in the gaming market began very early on, and the first major purveyor of that was who? Nintendo. Right? Nintendo really kind of doubled down and started the practice at a very grand scale of paying developers to only develop their game, right, for their platform. Sega was sometimes able to still get those games on their platform, but they had to do the work themselves, right, in order to port the game to Sega. So again, very long, venerable practice, right, in the gaming industry, and these things aren't new.
Yeah. What's up, BG? BG's asking if you're on Twitter, Game Logic. Yeah, BG, Game Logic is on Twitter.
Very, very, very tepidly at this point. So I'm not. So I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure I follow Broken Games. But as of recently, I have uninstalled the app for my phone. So I'm on there sporadically at this point, just because some of the things I see just give me an aneurysm, and they always think it's weird when my eyes just start bleeding at work from the things that I'm reading. So
you're like, Logic, what's going on? Oh, same old, another day on Twitter. People that have never developed a game argue with developers, and people are armchair lawyers. And yeah, I mean, it's it's really weird for me. And I've been gaming for 40 years to see this argument about Sony being dishonest, Sony with dirty business practices. It's like, because, someone, and we talked about this on DM, there's a comment on Crossfire when someone's like, this hurts consumers. Now, you kind of provided some additional context to that, where I was kind of like, no, I don't think it hurts consumers. But I also was thinking from when people say that they're not being intellectually consistent with their argument either. You can't on one hand say that Sony blocking games from Game Pass hurts the consumers, and then on one side cheer pom-pom Microsoft acquiring Bethesda or ZeniMax, because the outcome of that is the same. I mean, Microsoft acquired ZeniMax to stock the Game Pass library with exclusive content that could be appealing to, one, their fan base, prevent churn, and maybe bring new people into the fold that maybe weren't on the Xbox platform, that were probably, let's say they were big fans of the Fallout series, other games that that are being made by, God, what are some of the developers? Like Machine Games, Arcane Studios. You know, if you're a fan of those games and we're playing those on PlayStation, as a consumer, you probably if you don't own an Xbox, you have a decision to make, whether or not you're going to stop playing those games. You have to decide for yourself, how much do I value those games? And if you value them a lot, you may go out and buy an Xbox now.
Right.
And,
so
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Well, I just want to jump in before something kind of runs away with itself in chat. And so Vex has mentioned all they want to do is take a business away from PlayStation and see them go out of business. So I'm gonna hard disagree with that perspective, right? Competitors in a market know that the market is best and healthiest and best benefits them when there is competition, right? And one of the proofs of that is it was critically Microsoft's cash infusion to Apple that kept them from going under and going out of business. Because at the end of the day, particularly as they were heading towards antitrust litigation with the DOJ, right, it is better for Microsoft for competitors to exist on the market. I don't believe for a minute that it's hold on, I may be wrong. Vex, I was talking about Xbox fans and big content creator logic. Okay, yeah, okay, Vex, sorry, I don't want to take off and skill that, but yes, in which case we'll say that my argument concurs with yours, right? That there's an Xbox fan base that wants PlayStation go out of business, and we talked about this a few weeks ago on BRAP. Actually, I asked, right? I think I asked the chat, right? When people rah and pom this stuff, and tear down the brand platform that they're not on, what is it that they're hoping for, right? Is the overall outcome, right? Do they hope for Nintendo to go out of business? Do they hope for Xbox to go out of business? Do they hope for, Microsoft isn't going to go out of business, but the argument for them to pull back from the market is the hope for PlayStation to go out of business. And so Vex, I absolutely agree. So instead of my discussion and my argument sounding like it was counter to yours, let me say that it is supportive of yours, right? That it makes no sense for anybody to wish for one of these competitors to go out of business. In fact, one of the things that I've written recently is I've said, this is one of the best, and I know there's a lot of this that goes around, this is the best time to be a gamer, but like what I love about this market, from being a person who's been studying this market for over 30 years, what I love about this market is, in times past, you could definitely argue that the key competitors of the market, in a lot of ways, in their strategy and their approach to the market and their marketing, we're all kind of sort of trying to do the same thing, right? We're all kind of sort of going after the same consumer base. There wasn't as much, market segmentation and segmentation of the addressable market, right? Everybody was kind of going.
Game Lodge, there was none at all.
Right,
I mean,
right.
Really, like, and I said this too. I'm sorry, I mean interrupt, but I said this.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I said this on a Spaces this week. I said, one of the great things about the current state of the gaming market is there's so many points of entry now, that really satisfy the appetite of a variety of different consumers who want to engage in gaming. They may not want to pay AAA games. They may go to a free-to-play model, or maybe they want to buy a console. They'll just game on mobile. So, but go ahead, man. I'm sorry. I just want to point that out. But
No. You're absolutely right. Right. One of the best things about the market is, right, all three of the core console manufacturers are exercising very different strategies. They are trying to hit at different parts of the market, and they are trying to compete in different ways. So Vex, I start off with hard disagreeing with you, then I tried to roll over to supporting you. Now I think I'm going to hard disagree with you again. I know that there's the feeling that acquiring isn't competing, but I'm personally of the mindset that, like, if I have financial muscle to flex, that is one of my competitive advantages, right, by definition. And so, acquisitions to me are definitely a way of competing. And I don't necessarily know or believe That it's about
kind of like free agency with the New York Yankees. But go ahead, man.
That it's really a matter of controlling the market. One of the things I've been digging into as we've had a lot of these conversations this week is a lot of people talk about like controlling a market or who's the market leader or exercising a lot of influence, right? One of the things I think that we need to recognize is that the biggest games and the biggest titles, right, only sell to about 10% of market penetration at best. When you talk about, right, the over, and we also tend to hyper focus on the U.S. market, but when we talk about the over like 300 million or so, gamers, install bases that there are across the consoles and inclusive of PC, and we talk about, right, that each one of those represents a potential sale, right, and then we talk about the largest selling games, right, and the units that they've moved, total market penetration for all of those potential unit sales is at best 10%, maybe a skosh over, right? So none of those singular titles are so large that they lend to any notion of controlling the market, right? The market is incredibly diverse still. There are things that definitely move the needle and definitely swing the pendulum. But at the end of the day, it's about getting footholds into different market segmentations, diversifying the portfolio, and creating the most opportunities, right, to generate revenue. And so my feeling is, Microsoft, even when it acquires, 30 studios, 33 studios, still isn't really going to be in a position to necessarily control the market, right? Then we talk about the global market, and we talk about the fact that there are 1.75 billion PC gamers, right? We talk about the fact that there are 2.8 billion gamers. We talk about the fact that, in the next couple of years, that number is going to hit 3 billion, right? We're not talking about maneuvers that are necessarily being put in place to allow you to strangle a market or overly control a market, right? Which again is one of the things that is being hashed out right now with all of these reviews and all these regulatory commissions.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. And I want to go back to kind of how it was 30 years ago. It was very like you didn't have much choice, and it's funny for all the talk of $70 games, which got me in trouble this week again because I was pointing out that in 2016, Game Logic, Persona 5 released and retailed for $60, which is the equivalent of $75 today. And you can only imagine the responses I got from that. There was only one entry point into gaming, really. Well, I mean, maybe two. I mean, if you had the means to go out and buy a PC at the time, you could play. And that's, remember when you would walk into Babbage's and the PC games were all front and center of the store. Do you remember those days?
Oh my God, Dad, you did not just say Babbage's.
I did say Babbage's, yes, because I used to go.
Software boutique, EB Games.
Yeah, software boutique, EB Games.
Funcom.
Yeah, but I remember going to Babbage's and, the PC games were, the PC games came in like these bigger boxes, right? And then you'd have like Nintendo in the back and Sega in the back of Babbage's. But, there wasn't a lot of choice. And so I guess, what frustrates me a little bit is when people are arguing over things that are so inconsequential to their gaming experience, enjoyment of video games, because what should be celebrated is the fact that we have, at least from the console space, you have 3 different platforms that are doing things differently, and that's great because you have choice now. We didn't have choice back then. You had Nintendo, at least from the console space, Nintendo or Sega. Most people were on the Nintendo platform because Nintendo had the bigger IPs, the Marios, the Zeldas, the Metroids. Not that Sega didn't put out any good content, but they weren't on the same level as Nintendo was. And Nintendo was getting a lot of exclusives, a lot that never made the light of day to Sega, the Sega Master System, Metal Gear, Ninja Gaiden, and there's a lot more. I'm only naming those two because those are the two that probably resonate with the people that are a little bit younger than me, that are listening to the show. But I think there's just a hyper focus on who number one is. And it's funny, like people are so focused on, and you mentioned Nintendo, so people are so focused on Sony that really Nintendo's the market leader right now. And what Nintendo's showing you is that you don't have to do, because one of the things that I see quite a bit is that, so the argument that Sony needs to put their games day and date into PlayStation Plus, and it's like, no, they don't. And if you don't believe me that they don't, or that they have to mimic the exact business model of their competitor, I'll insert Nintendo into the argument and show you that Nintendo's doing their own thing, and they're the market leader right now. They sold 111 million Switches since 2017. They've sold almost 1 billion copies of software. One of their games has sold almost 50% of the install base. I think it's Mario Kart 8. I mean, Nintendo is quietly out here just dominating the market space. Do they have a robust online system? No. You still have to basically share a social security number as an online ID to connect with friends. They don't have a subscription service in the vein of Microsoft or Sony. They charge $60 for games, and I always hear the argument, and people are like, "Oh, well, that game, it doesn't look like it should be $70. It's it doesn't have these big graphics. It looks like a reskin." And here's Nintendo that let's be real in terms of production values and quote unquote AAA games, probably aren't on par with $70 games, but they're charging you for $60, and they're selling very well. What does that all say, Logic? Somebody said, why is Bill Clinton presenting now? I don't know. I didn't even know that was Bill Clinton, by the way. Go ahead.
No, I'm probably going down the wrong hole of hyper focusing on the chat, but Vex, Vex, I think you bring up some good points. This last statement, Microsoft doesn't care about the console market. I'm sure that's maybe being said that way for a certain reason. Obviously, that's an absolute, and probably in my mind doesn't have a ton of traction to it. I would concur that Microsoft's priority is not the console market at the top level and at the corporate level, as I've mentioned before. Their primary competitors, as should be obvious to people at this point, are Amazon, Google, to a lesser extent, Apple, and Facebook. Those are your big five when I talk about big tech, right? Their priority right on the gaming market is more about how that adjacency feeds their other corporate ventures and corporate strategy. So yes, right, matters in the gaming market, in my opinion, will be sacrificed, right, in order for them to make those strategic approaches that are their larger concern.
Yeah, I might need to start doing a Bill Clinton impersonation, by the way. I do want to welcome the great gaming Forte. I think, Forte, are you at work today, sir?
I actually am about to walk in there.
Forte.
Tag me a PS5 when you go in there, because I keep looking for one.
Come to a GameStop on 820 and you'll get one.
Ah, there we go.
So I just came in here to say one thing to you. This is directed to BRAP because BRAP is on that foolishness again. Sir, who was the one that told you 2 years ago all that stuff you just said about Nintendo? Who told you that 2 years ago? And you told me Nintendo don't count because they started the generation late. And I mean, they started the generation early. And
I never said that.
This. Yes, you did. Yes,
that was slow-mo.
No, are you serious right now, Brad? No.
I don't remember saying that. I don't remember saying that, Forte. But go ahead, man.
Okay, so you said it was okay. So well, then I'm gonna give slow-mo smoke on Thursday too. Then
but, I don't remember saying that. To be honest with you, I don't remember saying.
Okay, I'm just saying because that's the biggest thing that I've always been telling people. It just seems like it always and I'm not gonna say I'm just messing around with you, but
no, I know.
I think I see a lot of people using that metric against everybody else now when nobody even cared about Nintendo 2 years ago. Now all of a sudden, just because it bolsters our argument, and it does bolster our argument that everybody's having right now. But I always look at that conversation. I'm like, we are truly in a community of people that if it suits their conversation, they'll literally turn an eye to everything they said 2-3 years ago to make a point just to, say they got a dub today. It's kind of crazy, but I do agree with everything you guys are saying, especially Game Logic, because I can't listen to Enrique. Enrique, he flip-flops too much.
I'm just shaking my head, sir.
I'm just messing with you, sir.
I'm just shaking my head. No, but I forget what you said about Nintendo 2 years ago, Forte. I really don't remember what you said specifically. But
the whole pandemic since then. So.
But I think you may have been in the argument that Nintendo. I feel like there was some conversation around is the Switch a console or not or something.
Oh well, we definitely know you can't hide from that one.
And I think that you may have made the argument that Nintendo is probably is the market leader or something like that. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Well, yeah, because I think the argument was because they launched a year early, they're not in the same generation as PlayStation 5 and Series X. Is that right?
That's what it was.
I think that's what it was. I don't think I was arguing against that. I think that I don't remember. I may have said no.
We're putting too much thought into that.
Yeah, I don't. I'm just trying to remember because I know. I don't know. I don't remember.
It doesn't matter. It's just the fact that let's just like going back to the conversation you guys were having. Ultimately, Nintendo shows everybody that exclusive content definitely matters on the platform. It definitely matters when they actually get, companies like Square to release games specifically for their platform and not bring them anywhere else. And then it just seems like most of these companies, they do definitely follow the money, and they definitely see where they know their games are going to thrive the most. That's why you see Square putting a lot of their JRPGs and stuff like that on the Switch, or some of their Western RPGs and stuff on the Switch, because they know they're going to do really, really well over there. And then you also see when it comes to Bayonetta and stuff, ever since Bayonetta 1, Bayonetta 2 and 3 has only been on the Switch, and we're finally getting the third Bayonetta this week because they see that the benefits of actually just making it just for that particular platform and stuff like that. This is something that's been going on forever. Everybody keeps forgetting that Microsoft purchased pretty much every major IP that they have outside of Forza. Forza is the only one I believe they actually created. And Fable they created too. They created Fable, they created Forza. Everything else has pretty much been purchased.
And Fusion Frenzy.
Infusion Frenzy. So, and guess what? There's really nothing wrong with that.
No, it's fine.
I do think the biggest conversation is a lot of people look at the conversation like, okay, there is a difference between buying up third parties and saying that they're going to be exclusive to our platform and outright purchasing something. If you in a lot of people's eyes, when you go out and purchase something, it's kind of an understanding that, yeah, of course, you own it. It's going to be on this platform compared to, when you're going out making third-party deals, like when Microsoft did the whole deal with Crystal Dynamics and they got the Tomb Raider Definitive Edition exclusive to their platform for the first year. Those are the type of exclusives that everybody looks at kind of side-eyed. It's like, okay, so you're literally just buying this exclusive to take away from another platform from a year. Versus something like, Activision or Bethesda. Yes, those games were available on other platforms, but you wholly went out and purchased this whole company. So you can kind of understand that, okay, yeah, these games are only going to be particular to our platform and everything else. So I think that's kind of the biggest hang up when it comes to a lot of people, because you really don't. I did see some people talking about the Bungie acquisition and stuff, and they were talking about how Destiny could be, exclusive to PlayStation, but Bungie kind of shot that down in the, during their negotiation tactics and saying that wasn't going to be the case. But, I didn't have a problem. Like, being a person that was a major Destiny player, if I would have had to go to PlayStation to play Destiny because that's where it was available, knowing that I played, pretty much my entire Destiny career on Xbox, I wouldn't have cared about it because I still can play the game, especially if they own the platform. It's completely different when you're taking parts of the game away and you can only access that stuff on another platform because they purchased something that way. So that's the kind of hang up I think a lot of other people really have, not really the fact that it's just exclusive. Like, if it was wholly purchased, fine. If it's something you're just buying just to piecemeal it out and everybody has to pay the same price to get the same game, but they're getting different experiences, that's a little bit different for people.
Yeah, no doubt. But apparently, Forte, you can't bring up Tomb Raider.
You can't bring up Tomb Raider. You can't bring up, any other ancillary title that happened to. So
yeah, exactly. But no, man, it's no great point. Forte, I might be hitting up for another PlayStation 5, man.
I haven't been messing with you in a while. That's it.
Thank you, sir, for coming in and trying to troll me. Forte, I may be hitting you up for another PlayStation 5.
Why?
Hey, man. Look, man. Don't ask why.
Didn't you just buy one from somebody?
Just take the money, sir. Just take the money.
Okay, yeah, you're right. I will take the money. I will take the extra power up points and everything. But yeah, because literally about to walk in here. But if anybody does want PlayStations, this what, Friday? No, Saturday. Saturday they'll be available in stores and stuff. So just check out your local retailer. You'll be able to get one. It's not like they're hard to find anymore.
Hey, hook up my man Game Logic, man. He's on the hunt for a PlayStation 5, man.
Just DM me, Game Logic. Just DM me.
All right, man.
We'll work something out.
Otherwise, I'm just gonna continue sitting here and playing Forza and Doom 3 and watching Lock and Key on Netflix on my Xbox.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing on PlayStation until November 9th anyway.
Hey, I love wrapping myself up in an ecosystem that I spend a lot of time in.
All right. Well, y'all have a good rest of the show.
All right, Forte, man. Have a good one, bro.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah. Well, slow-mo backslap with the smoke. I just think it's funny that you can't get Forte to play any games with anyone, but someone goes live and he shows up like the creepy old guy at the club stuck on the young chicks. Oh, he laughed. Oh, my God. Slow-mo. Come on, man. Oh, man. That is funny.
I guess it's, kind of the conversation you guys were having and some of the comments in the chat too. I guess people will have perspectives, and I'm not saying everyone, but some people will have emotions tied around like what is competing, and acquisitions not competition. And I just don't understand that. Like money is a resource, right? Competing is about utilizing all of the resources, right, available to you, to gain a competitive advantage, right, over your opponent. So, to me, acquisition is something like Google acquired Android, right? They didn't come up with it; they bought it, right, and that allowed them to compete with Apple. So these things are just, the way things happen at scale. In the technology market, it's fine to have the sentiment, right, around kind of the artistic vector, that, creation is better than acquisition. And that's a fine, altruistic like perception to have. But at the end of the day, right, that's not the thing that returns value to shareholders, right? Shareholders don't care, right? Whether it's original IP or whether you bought it or whether or not you made it exclusive. They just care that you're, constantly returning dividends and constantly increasing the value of the stock.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny. A lot of people, again, we always go back to the fact that this is business, and like you said, Game Logic, these companies have a responsibility to their shareholders. And the shareholders don't care if you homegrown a studio on your own, or if you bought a studio. They're looking at, okay, well, how much money are we making? And look, I kind of think that's kind of been a talking point that people are using to downplay or as ammunition against another platform. It's I don't know, man. Those kind of comments, I'm just like, whatever. I don't put too much stock into it. I guess what I'm saying.
Right. I just want to get your back. So Texas, I think that was just an unfortunate coincidence of timing. We weren't talking about, BRAP wasn't talking about your comment about Tomb Raider, because he and I have been talking about that in DM since over the weekend. No, there's a prominent Twitterer, YouTuber with a bunch of followers who, made some comment about, Sony PlayStation fans will constantly bring up Tomb Raider, but blah, 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 blah. And I look, this is another kind of sentiment, right, in terms of how we analyze the market that I don't agree with. And that's, I'm going to cherry pick and take off the table matters of history to suit my narrative. And I'm like, no, it's all pertinent. It's all valid. There is no statute of limitations, right? When a company did something bad, whereby we just go, oh, well, that never happened, right? Like, it's all part of history. It's all part of the industry. It all shapes, right, the actions people are taking. I talked about, like, in the past, like, And I'm not talking. I get Texas that you understand that it wasn't pointed at you. So now I'm not ranting at you. I just want to separate the. I'm now ranting about kind of how some of these takes happen in the gaming community. Like I said, we cherry pick and we take things off the table, and I just don't really understand. And I talk about how at corporations, like, things happen and they stick with cultures for very, very, very long periods of time, right? We talk about the amount of cash that Apple hoards, right? And people are like, I don't understand it. You get, agitative investors who say, well, you should be using that money to acquire people. And what people don't get in context is, there are still people at Apple who lived through the bad times of when that company almost went under. And there's a strong part of the leadership at Apple that has that never again mentality, right? And that's why they hoard cash, because they never again want to be dependent upon Microsoft bailing them out, right? And keeping them in the market. So, I've talked about being part of M&As where very old corporations in this country, right, were acquired and became parts of companies, right? Corporations like General Electric that had very distinctive cultural traits, right? And how those cultural traits will still permeate, right, for decades down the line, right, in terms of how people handle their fiduciary responsibility, how there are people that are less risk averse, how certain parts of a corporation will be, I'm going to say who are more risk averse, right, who are very conservative and won't green light like investments and things to be made because they come out of that old mentality of, blue chip, play it safe, double down on the technologies that we've always historically, gone down the path of and owned, right? Don't invest a lot in innovation, and how you have other parts of the corporation that don't have that mentality. So I don't really get and understand why it's why I characterize this thing of how, the narrative is created first, right? And then people go out and cherry pick the facts that they perceive best benefit it, rather than, laying all the puzzle pieces out on the table and trying to see, right, the image that you could create out of it.
That's a great point, man. I mean, they and that's the unfortunate part of some of the dialogue that I see on gaming Twitter, that people do actually do that, and that individual in particular was doing that, and the point of, I think, people bringing up the Tomb Raider thing is that in fact that this is not just that Microsoft does, and it's common practice from a historical perspective. This is nothing that's new. Like what Microsoft accused Sony of doing is not new. I want to go back to the her consumer things. I think we kind of I think that's when Forte joined and derailed the conversation. Thank you, Forte. So I was saying that that it doesn't hurt consumers. You and I guess I wanted you to kind of frame out what you responded to me in the DM, because I thought it was a great point. It's something that you think you fleshed it out a little bit more, but this goes. I think that your point that you made goes back to other things, other behaviors or choices that we make as consumers with other products, but for some reason it gets lost in gaming. But I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
Right. Well, it kind of also trades on the things you and I have talked about before, where we talk about how people kind of take some topics that may potentially be valid, right, but will kind of weaponize them, right, just in the particular way that they articulate them, right. And so, definitely, I mean, you can definitely like accuse us and blame us for looking at it that way because we're looking at it through a certain lens, right. But the invocation of the term hurts consumers definitely made me kind of think about, what people will characterize as anti-consumer practices, right? And what I said, to you is, and so I think you were keying on that. I was keying on that as well, right, when I saw that comment come across. But at the end of the day, right, I don't think it's anti-consumer, nor do I think, but I do think it hurts consumers only in so much as, like, the entire reason that you make these deals, right, is to make the consumers who are in the other camp of the other brand feel disadvantaged, right, to feel like there's something they don't have, right, and to influence them to consider in either wholesale coming over into your camp, right, or at least double dipping, right. And so I think that notion that it, disadvantages consumers who are oriented around only consuming from the other brand is definitely true. And it's definitely the reason why they do it, why they spend the money, right? But that is true of both Microsoft and Sony, right? You could also say that it hurts consumers to put a bunch of games in Game Pass in a subscription service and create a market area that has a lower barrier to entry than asking somebody to pay $60 or $70, right, to participate in a game that they may not finish, that they don't know if they're going to like, right? It creates a new market vector. And as people, I'm glad to see, are saying in the chat, right, that's just competition, right? And it's kind of like I mentioned before, right? Just because Microsoft has changed the landscape of the battlefield, by the way, that's not the only place that they've done it, right, in the gaming industry. In fact, it is a tried and true Microsoft competitive behavior for them to often go down this path, right? To say, hey, if we're not able to get a foothold and attraction in the market, then let's change the landscape of the market, right? This is also not solely a Microsoft thing. You can go back to Sun Tzu's Principles of War, right? And find these things. This is very much a topic in grand strategy, very much a topic in tactics, very much a topic in international diplomacy, very much a topic in business when you talk about, right, the things that are educated and taught at the Harvard Business School, and other places that are derivatives of that, right? If your competitor has a market on lock, then you, and in boxing, right, you don't box a boxer toe to toe who you have a specific disadvantage with, right? You change the battlefield, you change the landscape of the war. And that is what Microsoft has done in this case. They have also done it in other places. They've attempted to do it with cloud. They attempted to do it in the enterprise. It is a strategy and a tactic that has worked incredibly well for them, and quite frankly has allowed them to survive, right, some of the years where they couldn't get the stock price to budge at all. It has allowed them to survive through the Ballmer years, right? It has allowed them to go on and now become a multi-trillion-dollar company, right? And so they've created this vector.
Oh, man, I remember when those stock prices were like stuck.
Yeah, for years.
And they weren't before that. Like I remember during the tech boom. That's anyhow like 24 years ago. But yeah, I mean, it's funny you brought that up because it brings back memories and having the stock and be like, what the hell's going on? Why does it seem stagnant? It's Microsoft, damn it.
Right. I mean, how was Ballmer able to stay as head of the company during that entire time?
I want to know how Ballmer sweats the way he does without passing out. But
right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's just things that they do, and they are things that are done to disadvantage other consumers, right? The same way as I said, right? Disney Plus, right, buys up The Simpsons so that no other streaming service has it. Why? Because they want to disadvantage consumers who are not part of their ecosystem in order to encourage them over to theirs.
And that's my point. Like, I'm seeing like YouTubers, influencers, people on Twitter, media types, like not all media types, but, kind of like pounding their fists on the table and saying, oh, my God, I can't believe this. I can't believe there's my Bill Clinton impersonation. I can't believe Sony's doing this. I don't know why. They're blocking games on Game Pass. This is terrible. Terrible for the consumers. But no one's pounding the table when Netflix does this. No one's pounding the table when Disney does this. It's like we experience this kind of thing every day with consumer products. My point is, why do people act like it's different for gaming? It's not. It's not. These companies are they're going to do the same things to try to get. Thank you, Brian King. He says my Clinton impersonation is on point. Cool. I can do Bill Clinton now. Game Logic.
All right, add that to your repertoire.
Yeah, I did not have relations with that woman. I don't know who she is. Hillary and I are very much in love. Oh my God, man. Who remembers that scandal? That was great. I lost my train of thought now because I got into my Clinton impersonation. But I guess my point is like, I just don't, for me, it's, I laugh because, and I scratch my head because I'm like, people, why are we having, like, you don't yell. I remember BG saying, I don't yell at the AMC movie theater for, charging more for popcorn or for tickets. I just move on. I make a decision as a consumer, and for gaming, that logic gets thrown out the window. And it's like I got to pound my fist on the table. I got to call out Sony for being shady and all this stuff. And it's like, guys, are you doing the same for Netflix? Are you doing the same? That's what I'm saying. There's no intellectual consistency in a lot of the things I'm seeing in gaming Twitter or from YouTubers or from influencers. I don't see it. It's maddening to me.
Yeah, and a lot of it is cyclical too, right? It keeps going around and around and around and around, right? One of the things, and one of the things that I'm not a super huge fan of, right, is this notion, and it's again why we see a lot of this behavior. Is I'm also not a fan of this notion like they did it to us, so let's do it to them, right?
Yeah, I see that a lot. Yeah.
So Sony fanboys made fun of Game Pass, and they have for years, and. Right, we had. I'm just going to outright call it foolishness and nonsense of like now we're making clapback rap videos, right, about Xbox gamers not having any games, and things like that. And I'm like, and so that's a bad, right. And then the flip side of that is Sony fans, Sony and because Microsoft fans were made fun of Game Pass for so long, now Sony fans, right, will. Poke fun and throw shade at like Microsoft's responses to like the Brazilian Commission, and I'm just like, it gets just so incredibly off the chain that it's just ridiculous, right? And the thing that I get bothered by is it just creates a lot of static and noise around people who maybe ostensibly might be trying to learn something about the industry and understand it. But it gets really difficult because we get these distraction rounds that are constantly thrown and these points of obfuscation that are constantly thrown, that interfere with people taking a genuine, unbiased take on the industry and kind of what's going on.
Yeah, it's unfortunate we don't get a lot of people on Twitter now that are actually in the industry engaging. It used like years ago that you would see you saw more developers, analysts, things like that, people involved in the industry having discussions, and they, the fanboys chase them away. They don't have anything to do with gaming Twitter now because when they would go in and try to offer some insight into the industry, they would just get attacked. And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. So in some places, in some ways, Twitter's become this echo chamber of nonsense where people are just, ranting away and making, putting on their best armchair developer impersonation and just lobbing grenades everywhere. I mean, that's kind of what's happened. And it wasn't always like that. Yeah. Go ahead.
The more ludicrous the take, the more traction it gets.
And that's actually true. I mean, that applies to, YouTube and things like that. So I do want to because there was a conversation I had with somebody here in the live chat, and not to, he knows who he is, and I said I was going to talk about this on BRAP this weekend. But this idea of we were having a discourse about what constitutes a complete game, and this happened as I was tweeting about how games are relatively cheaper today than they were. Yes, and when I say relatively, obviously $70, and we talked about when you adjust for inflation, game logic. That's why I bring up the Persona 5 experience or example when that game launched in 2016. But he was saying, well, we don't get complete games today. To get the complete game, you got to spend $80 to $100. And what he was saying is, these games have microtransactions, DLC, so you're not getting the complete game at let's say $70. So. I think I may have mentioned this to you too. I think Logic about this point and I was like arguing, no, I said you are getting the complete game at retail. Everything else is just in addition to. Like when I bought Fallout 4, I completed the main quest and I completed the game. Everything else after the fact was in addition to that game. So, what say you, sir?
Yeah, this is a conversation that I often have with people, and so let me say my perspective as a software vendor, because it's a conversation that I often put a stop to with customers. The whole notion that a consumer who doesn't see the source code has any notion of what completeness is just false. It is either false because of your inability to really understand it, but it's also false because only at the end of the day does the person developing the code actually know what's complete. We simply define what complete is, right, in terms of how we market and deploy the product. But you're also not able to grasp what complete is because you don't know, right, in terms of what was the budget, right? And that's a very arbitrary line, right, for me to move. Is the product complete based on the baseline budget? Is it complete based on the budget that I went back for when the project had a cost overrun? Is it complete based on, right, the inclusion of lots of legacy code, right? And I know, and Slow-Mo's in chat doing a great job helping I think, push some of the points that collectively as a cast we try and promulgate. But I'm also not necessarily in agreement with the notion of things that people will argue should have been in Halo Infinite right on day one. Again, that's a subjective line that I think from the developer perspective, is Halo version 0, right, the notion of the complete package, and therefore does Halo version 2 need to be inclusive of the exact same content? I don't know. Is the slot the same? Probably not. Are the function points the same? Probably not. Is the total volume of requirements the same? Probably not. Is the total amount of testing that has to be done? Probably not, right? Did more defects arrive, right, at certain points in the project than others? Probably. So, again, the notion of completeness is one that I would always say that the consumer can't really make. What the consumer has to do is the consumer just has to decide what the value of the package is to them. And kind of one of the things, I don't think I put this in, guys, in your conversation, because I think that person you were arguing with, I don't know that they would really grasp it or, apply any type of rational logic to it. But, this notion of, well, back in the day, games were complete packages and you got everything, right, in air quotes. And now you have the game package plus you have all these add-ons and they don't give it to you. Well, if the total level of effort required to develop all of that content is greater than what was delivered before, they're not one and one, and it's not an apples to apples conversation. By the same token, it also needs to be considered what were the delivery mechanisms that were available back then. It wasn't feasible to deliver DLC, right? You would have to put it together as an expansion pack. And when you put it together, which just wasn't really feasible on consoles at all, right? They first initially became available to PCs. So again, it's kind of a ridiculous comment to talk about, well, the packages before used to be complete. They were complete because the technology limited us as such, right? It couldn't be done. And so again, this notion, and this is what I go back to of, when I asked the chat here, people are saying now that $70 games are unjustified, right? And they come up with all these mental gymnastics and all the mental math.
Isn't $70 cheaper than $60 at the launch of last generation?
Well, so here's the thing, right? And I hope this doesn't get me in trouble. I hope this doesn't get me kicked off the cast. I know the argument that you're making, and from a macroeconomic standpoint, that is quantitatively true, right? But even when this argument started back, right, with Colin Moriarty, right, when he first kind of put this model on the table,
okay, because I know where you're going with this, by the way, and by the way, I know, because I think we've talked about this a little bit. I don't disagree with you, but my point is, like you mentioned, from a macroeconomic standpoint, that games are in fact cheaper today than they were at the start of last generation. But there's and Game Industry Biz has a great article about this, by the way, how games are relatively cheaper today, but they also factor in that consumer perception of 70 is higher than 60 and don't take into account the value of the dollar of 60 in 2013 versus what that means today in 2022. But I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
No, I mean, you pretty much stole my thunder.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. But go ahead, man. Flesh it out, because go ahead, flesh it out a little bit.
So I absolutely agree, right? The truth, right, in terms of the science and law of economics is true, right? They are absolutely less expensive, right, than before. The problem I have, right, is in my mind, whether or not it's a formally accepted theory or not, I think about, right, apparent inflation, right? How does that feel, right? And this gets into areas of like price sensitivity, right, which kind of also goes along with things like age, and kind of socioeconomic status and where you are in life. Games may have been more expensive before in the past, right? But as I proceed down my path of life, I gain more disposable income. There are things that I care about now that I didn't care about before, right? And so if a game was technically more expensive before, but as a 15 or 16-year-old, I didn't have any other responsibilities. So I didn't care if I went to Toys R Us, right, or to Spiegel's, right, and bought my game for $60, and that kind of blew all my cash. That was fine. But now, if you talk to me about a game going to $70 and my socioeconomic status has relatively moved, right, in comparison to where I was before, or I have different responsibilities or my budget outlay looks different, right, that could have an apparent inflation or an apparent impact to me that's different, right, than the laws of macroeconomics dictate. So since Colin has been talking about this and right as this has continued to propagate, what I've said is right, but at the end of the day, does that matter to the consumer? Now, the difference is that people will say, but that doesn't matter to me, so therefore my stance that it's more expensive is the valid one. That I don't agree with, right? And this is where I go back to and say, the thing to me that would, in my mind, be proper to say is, the fact of the matter is that it's more expensive, but my value-based decision that I have to make for myself as an individual consumer is that I don't want to pay $70. Full on, I'm totally fine with that. What I'm not fine with is all these crazy constructions of cost models, right? Trying to say, what it takes to build a game. The guy arguing with the developer that, that doesn't really take that much level of effort. Again, a conversation that I frequently have with customers in my domain, right? That doesn't really take that much level of effort. Or the other cost model I saw the other day that like, this is what the developers get paid and the publisher is just taking that $10 and it's all going to profit. I'm like, no, that's not how it works, right? We don't, the $70 that you pay to GameStop doesn't come in and get put in a cash box, right? And get dispensed out by accounts payable and accounts receivable, right? Like on a daily basis. That's not really how it works. It's at the cost center level. It's why I constantly talk about P&L. And there's a difference, right, in kind of how it comes into the corporation and how it goes out.
Yeah, and by the way, Falzakar says Spiegel's been gone for years. You're showing your age.
That is very true. That's the other thing. I saw somebody on Twitter mention the other day. It was in their bio, and I apologize if this applies to anybody in the chat. Is like, I play on all consoles. I've been gaming since 1986. I've owned every single console. I'm like, dude, if you started playing games in the mid to late 80s, you have not owned every single console, right?
That's true.
Came in Generation 3, maybe the tail end of Generation 2, and there were a handful of consoles that came.
ColecoVision and television, Atari. Yeah, that's
R2600, Magnavox Odyssey 2, the original Magnavox Odyssey.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great point. Oh man, you know what? I did want to ask you something, and oh my god, I just completely forgot what it was. So we talked about $70 games. Ah, shit. What the hell was I going to talk about now? Oh man, I'm getting old. I can't remember now. Oh, here we go. Now I remember. Jesus, man, that's not good. Drawing blanks. So, I'm sorry, Logic. Is that? Did you have anything else you wanted to add about the $70 thing, or?
No, man. I'm good.
Okay. So there's this running narrative going out there that's completely false, by the way. And unfortunately, I'm seeing content creators, people with blue check marks, influencers, and it's basically that Sony is responsible for putting Sega out of business, out of the console business. Oh man, this one makes my brains hurt. First of all, there's literature out there that stories that have been written about the downfall of Sega, which you could buy online, and there's this thing called Google. You can Google this information, but people are really running with this narrative, and it's mind blowing. It's like, what are we doing here? Look, I don't understand. Business Insider actually just had an article. I retweeted it this weekend about the downfall of Sega. Read it.
Right, and I love what Bender of Strings put in the chat, because it's absolutely what I agree with. Right, Sega put Sega out of business. You read what Peter Moore has written, and you will find that the primary reason, right, Sega went out of business was because of a vast disconnect, right, in the market approach and strategy between Sega Japan and Sega US, right? And the decisions that were made in fielding the Sega Saturn and the Sega Dreamcast that just put Sega in a position, right? And I talk about this a lot in business, about right leading tales, right, and how, right, which is also why I don't like the cherry picking of historical factors, right? Sometimes, a lot of times, decisions that you make will get you just too far behind the eight ball, right, to where you can't catch up, right? Your ability, right? I go back and talk about cash, right? Cash on hand. What cash on hand, right, and this even bleeds into acquisitions, right? What cash on hand allows you to do, it allows you to compensate, right? It allows you that when there are things that happen, right, that wind up putting you behind the eight ball from a technology nature, from a development nature, right? We talk on and on and on and all the time about how long it takes games to be made, right? That you can't just come from behind. You arguably can't come from behind in a single generation, right? And this is a thing that we're going to wind up seeing. And in fact, right, where I've talked about, right, some of this, some of these things that get talked about Sony versus Xbox, right? And about how, sometimes the narrative comes out that Sony is like entirely disadvantaged, right? What we're not going to do is we're not going to sit here, right, and behave like Sony has not outsold Microsoft 2 of 3 generations, right? Despite all of Microsoft's financial muscle. And in the third generation, right, that's in that bucket, right, the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 generation, Sony walked Microsoft down after having a year-long lead and after totally flubbing, right, the launch of the PlayStation 3 to be at parity, right, in terms of number of consoles sold by the end of that generation. So, but what cash on hand does, it allows you to flex. It allows you to do things like you could argue that because of the fact that the Sony platform outsold Xbox 2 out of those 3 generations and walked them down the third, that this might be the point. If this were Sega, right, Sega would be done, right, at this point in the generation. Microsoft has enough financial muscle and cash on hand to take actions that compensate for the fact that they got behind the eight ball from a software development perspective, from a addressable market perspective, right, from an install base perspective. And so, again, going back to the Sega discussion, right, it's like Bender String said, right, Sega put themselves out of business, not necessarily the actions of Sony.
Exactly, and that's my point. I think the one thing that people cherry pick is that that Sony was able to lower the price of the PlayStation, the original PlayStation, and that was being, quote unquote dirty. And I'm like, no, that's just business. It ain't personal. It's business. It's not being dirty. It's being competitive. And Sega wasn't in a position to compete where they could do that with the Dreamcast, with the Sega Saturn, because of how expensive it was for them to make that platform. That's a Sega problem.
Right. And that was because they chose to juke, right, when maybe they should have zagged, or they chose to do a spin move, right, and when maybe they should have chosen to do a stiff arm. They chose to make what in their mind, right, maybe arguably was the more powerful console, right? That more powerful console had costs.
Yeah, exactly. It did have costs. It didn't allow them it didn't allow them that flexibility they needed to compete with PlayStation, and that's a decision that rests solely on Sega, not on Sony. Slow-mo backslap says it best. How is being smart being dirty? I mean,
okay. Which applies to the overall theme of this entire rant, right? It's not, in my mind, from my perspective, it's not dirty for Microsoft to go out and acquire people. It's not dirty for Sony to make marketing agreements, right, that provide competitive advantage to their platform. Like, I go back to, we make up a lot of stuff, right, in the digital age, and particularly around the gaming community. How do you think products get to end caps at grocery stores? Right? Some of that happens because there's stock that needs to move. Some of that happens because a vendor makes a licensing agreement or a prime real estate agreement, right, in terms of providing extra cash, right, to a chain of retail stores so that their stuff can get more prominent marketing positioning, right, within the store's real estate, right, than otherwise might happen, right? So again, this was going on for a very, 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 very long time, right, before these practices became kind of the norm in the gaming industry.
Yeah, Sony and Samo brings up a great point. He goes, same way Sony pivoted from bundling the camera on the PlayStation 4 to dropping it at being $100 cheaper than the Xbox One.
Yep.
I mean, Sony saw the reaction. So what did Sony do when the whole DRM thing came out? Remember that infamous video?
Right. Well,
with game sharing. I mean, but
yeah. It's also kind of one of the reasons, right? And again, we kind of lose visibility on this stuff, some of this stuff because E3 has gone away, right? There's also the fact that both Microsoft and Sony, right, for each of those E3s would come in with some number of things in their back pocket, right? That a lot of things weren't set, right? And a lot of them were waiting to see what the other one did, right? And then based on that, right, decisions would be made final, right? Some reveals of licensing agreements, right, might have been held back and made. Very often, decisions on pricing weren't absolutely final until they saw what the other guy did.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm sorry. I'm reading the live chat here. Viper XD says, keeping a product exclusive to your platform is different than blocking a product from one service while not even including it in yours.
There's there's no such thing as blocking. That's not a business term that's actually used, right? There are marketing deals, there are exclusivity deals, there are target positioning deals. So this whole notion of blocking is a connotation that's kind of come up in the conversation. I think some people have maybe feel that it was gleaned from the Microsoft documentation. I don't know. I don't really care.
I think that's what it's coming from too, blocking. And I can understand the consumer perspective that if it's being taken away, it's being blocked. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but again, I go back to that's the point, right? The point is to make the consumer base of the other platform feel disadvantaged and to feel like there's something that they don't have, right? By which they would be advantaged by either A, being on the other platform or double dipping, right? We have this whole notion of FOMO, which I think is a thing that's understood, right, by the gaming community, and all of these are deals to capitalize on that, right? Plain and simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's saying that essentially what it is just a dumbed down term. He's saying blocking is kind of a dumbed down term of keeping things off for one platform or whatever the case is. But I think the problem is that the word blocking, Viper XT, is being weaponized as a way to point out that Sony is somehow being dirty. When in fact,
or anti-consumer.
Anti-consumer. When in fact this is something that is part of not just the gaming industry, but other businesses, other products, why do you think Nike signs LeBron to exclusive deal, has signed up LeBron to an exclusive deal to make shoes for him? Why does Nike do that? Because they want LeBron, who's a brand associated with their brand. They want you to go to that. They know if you're a LeBron fan, gotta get the LeBron James to come out every, we see it in sports. I said the Yankees earlier, but the Yankees throw their weight around with their money.
Okay. It's why Jordans are only Nikes.
Exactly. It's why and they keep selling you those Jordans from 1985 minus the air bubble for $150.
Yeah, and C Fresh is pointing it out. I think I tried to walk through this before, but maybe I didn't do it on the show, right? So I think a thing that should be understood is, right, stores are now digital, right? And so when I talk about end caps, right, in brick and mortar stores, the virtual representation of that is now the digital store. And so prominent positioning in the digital store is things like being on that featured list at the top, right? In some cases, being on lower tiers of subscription services now is, I guess, the way I have to articulate it, since we have subscription services all over the place, right? But being positioned on either, old style PlayStation Plus or old style games with gold, right? That is a thing that the platform owner owns, which is of value to the supplier trying to get visibility on their game in the market. So that thing has a value that you can essentially ascribe a dollar value to, right? Because at the end of the day, all these things get dollar values ascribed to them, right? If I put you on my digital storefront and I put you in the featured section, right, that thing has value. And so I, as a supplier, get to a point where I make a decision where I say, that shouldn't be free, right? Or that shouldn't just be an oh, by the way, right? And so if I'm putting my game on the PlayStation platform and it is being positioned prominently, that thing has value, and therefore it may be a negotiating item, right, that there winds up being a discussion about, right, with that platform owner. Same thing for the App Store, right? Same thing for the PlayStation Store, right? At a certain point as a platform holder, right? And this gets back to the whole Apple Epic lawsuit, right? And the topics that come up during then, right? That's a digital storefront. I'm going to get to a point where I stop giving that stuff away for free, right? And so if I say to you, I'm going to feature your title prominently in my digital storefront, right? I'm going to give you a position that is preferential to you and creates visibility for you over another game, right? But in order to do that, you can't do X, right? I go back and I talk about, dealings that an old corporation that I had with one of the top cloud service providers on the planet, right? There were things that we were given, right? But the exchange for that is there were other things that we weren't supposed to do with other cloud service providers, right? Again, it's just the way business works. And what we need to recognize is that these digital storefronts and positioning within digital storefronts are things that have value just in the same way that end caps and brick and mortar stores used to.
Yeah, and that's a great point because that's kind of a point I made on Crossfire. Like, Sony is saying, hey, we have this, we have 150, and again, I'm not saying this is exactly what they say. What I'm saying is there's value in having, let's say, an install base of 150 million consoles. You saying to the developer publisher, hey, when our gamers log into our platform, they're going to see Madden Football 2022 plastered all over the front, of the logon screen. They're going to see that, or they're going to see a window saying Madden coming August, whatever. Right? They're going to see that, and there's value to that. But also what Sony is doing is protecting their investment, saying, hey, if we're going to offer you this, we need to get something out of it too. It's a deal between two parties. They both need to benefit from that deal, and that's it.
Right. Things I build have value, and they all need to make return. Right. Yeah.
No, I just and I don't know, man. I just don't understand why people think that. I don't know, man. The idea of dirty and that somehow this is like totally out of the ordinary. It's just it's like I don't know, man. Like I don't know. It gives me a headache, to be honest with you. Like because this happens, and we live this every day with every consumer product. We talked about Nike signing LeBron, right? We talked about LeBron's not going to Adidas. He's just not. And if you want that LeBron, you got to buy the Nike shoes. No one's yelling at Nike, you're being dirty. You know what I mean?
Right. And a lot of it has to do with kind of our interpretations of the nature of the way certain entities act, right? And I, to a certain extent, while we've pushed back against it, there's an aspect of it that I get, right? When I go back and I talk about like the FTC regrets, right, not having intervened in the Facebook Instagram deal, in the Facebook WhatsApp deal, right? And I talk about the other gamers that I know that like hate exclusivity, right? I guess there's an aspect of it that I get, right? We would all love for the gaming market to be this altruistic, industry that ascribes to this ethos that is entirely oriented around the artistic vector and creativity, right? But, a few weeks ago, my dog killed a rabbit, right, in the dog run, right? Rabbit was in the dog run, rabbit got killed, right? I was bothered by that. I would have preferred that my dog didn't do that, right? I was kind of angry, but as my wife advised me thereafter, right, I can't really blame the dog for killing the rabbit, right? And so by the same token, right, I would love to live in this utopia, right, of this altruistic market where these types of deals didn't get made, and I guess I understand that, right? But by the same token, it's a capitalist market. These are the types of things that happen. This is the way the industry has evolved over time, right? And so it's difficult. I can't understand the coming down on the side of, well, Sony's being dirty, particularly when it's Sony's being dirty in this instance, but this other instance, right, whatever they did was okay. Right. And the same thing from the Microsoft side, right? Oh my God, Microsoft is being dirty, but let's not bring up Tomb Raider, and let's not bring up the fact that, Microsoft was found guilty of anti-competitive practices at the beginning of the 2000s, and so had to take actions to break Internet Explorer. We'll just ignore that. That's not actually pertinent, right? We're just, that's just something fanboys are bringing up, right? Because I've put a statute of limitations around, what can be referred to as, as far as when Microsoft has done things bad.
Yeah, that's funny. That's why I bring up the Tomb Raider thing, because people put a statute of limitation on that as an example of this sort of practice happening in the industry and Microsoft engaging in it. So it's just, yeah. It's let's see, it's 12 o'clock. I do need to wrap up these. It's now become a lunch rant. It was a coffee rant, but now it's a lunch rant. But I do need to wrap up this rant, unfortunately. Yeah, I wanted to just have this rant because just to hopefully have a sensible discussion around, Microsoft's response to Sony and also kind of just talk about, some of the narratives that are going on out there that really are that are intellectually inconsistent. It just are just terrible. Bad takes, as I call them. And hopefully just, bring some kind of, I don't want to use the word common sense, but I don't know, just bring a different perspective to the conversation than what I'm seeing on Twitter and what I'm seeing from YouTubers, influencers. Just brings a different perspective to the table that, isn't fueled in pom-pomming corporations and trying to get a W on the Twitters, which I still don't know what that means. Like, do you get like a trophy or something when you when you win a debate, I guess, on Twitter? I don't know.
You get a Chivo.
Chivo pops. Get a Chivo? Does something pop up, right? They'll get a trophy, right?
Yeah, and to further that thing, look, at the end of the day, right, I'm not going to sit here, talking about some of the comments that went into the last video, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that we're necessarily 100% right, but my point that I've always said is, like, when you go through these things and when you look at them and when you consider them, you should be listening to anywhere from at least 3 to 5 other perspectives, right? But before you make a decision, I acknowledge, right, the Colin Moriartys and, these other people, and like the guy who was in chat like last time who was like name dropping, well, Jez said this, well, so-and-so said that. I mean, first of all, I don't really give a shit. But second of all, like, look, great, like, listen to those people, but also listen to some alternative perspectives, right? Just like we talk about in politics, right? You shouldn't just listen to the conservative view or just listen to the liberal view, because the far ends of that spectrum are obviously contorting and doing things, right, to best advantage them. Just like we talk about in this market, the RFI responses are contorted, right, to achieve specific competitive advantages, right? And so listen to multiple perspectives, listen to alternative takes, come down and make a decision. And if you listen to the podcast and you decide you still believe what you believe, that's fine. But at least you heard different perspectives on it rather than just falling off the log, believing, right, the first, like, kind of ludicrous take that you see that comes across your windshield on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point of doing this rant, because I haven't found anything that has been, I don't know. I'm finding these really hot takes that are just based on, again, pom-pomming for a corporation or trying to win a conversation or trying to show you why one company's worse than the other or how this company's better better because they're, quote unquote, they care more about the consumer. It's just like, these companies don't care about consumers. They care about making money. And like big shout out to Eric Jackson. He says this all the time. Their goal is to separate your money from your wallet, and that's it. They don't care about you. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's also put some truth in advertising, right, or around the type of behavior that we're railing against, right? A lot of people will ascribe to the behaviors and opinions, right, with these brand-aligned networks, right, that have very large followings. And let's not be foolish, right? Those people are doing that, right? While we're talking about being angry about predatory practices, right? Those people are doing that because they are preying on you, right, in a manipulative manner to get the clicks and to get the views and to get the follows. Because it is a well-known fact, right, that if you want to grow big, right, and you want to be a big thing, right, brand yourself as an Xbox person, brand yourself as a PlayStation person, right? Either of those vectors get you far more traffic, right, and get you far more traction with a followership, right, than being multi-platform. We even talk about this in the streaming community, right, that it's really difficult to get traction as a variety streamer, right? much easier to pick a specific game and a specific property, right, to be aligned with, or even a specific genre. Much more difficult to gain traction, right, in my opinion, as a more credible personality, right, than to have the aperture a little wider and a little more open, and to really consider things from a quantitative perspective. That doesn't get you a lot of views, and it doesn't get you a lot of clicks, and it doesn't win you the popularity contest, right? But while you're going down the path of kind of, jumping on the bandwagon for these Xbox brands and PlayStation brands, right? Consider the fact that those people are playing a game too, and those people are being manipulative, right, in order to get you to join into that cult.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually looking at somebody's Twitter account right now who's out here. He's an Xbox person. He's out here pom-pomming and weaponizing something David Jaffe said, and saying PlayStation's days as market leader are numbered. Why is he doing that? Why does it matter if PlayStation's not the market leader? Why does it matter if Xbox is? To certain people, that matters, and that's what he's playing into. Like Texas says, drama sells. Hence my clickbait title here. Xbox calls out PlayStation Shady's business practices. Gamers are angry. Look, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with what you just said, Game Logic. It's true. It is a manipulation of one's, I guess, feelings or emotions towards a platform. That's happening. It's funny. I remember when I first started BRAP, B Money said to me, he goes, hey, if you want to get big overnight, just start a pro Xbox podcast. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to do that because I game on everything. I wanted to create a platform where people who game on multiple platforms or maybe didn't want to get a platform-centric point of view could come and just listen. And that's because, and everyone that I've had on the panel as a panel member, they're mostly console centric. They go where the games go. And that's kind of, it's funny. People think that I'm a PlayStation, console only gamer. And it's like, no, I mostly game on PC. But I go where the games are. There's times while I'm like right now I'm playing on the Xbox Series X. I'm playing Fortnite because I can play that game on console at 120 FPS. In a couple weeks, I'll be on PlayStation 5 playing The Last of Us Remake. So, anyhow. Well, look, Game Logic, I want to thank you again for your time. I appreciate it. I know this was very impromptu, by the way. So, yes, I am a hater, Texas. Yes, thank you. But no, man, I really appreciate your time because this was really last, man. We were going to do this last night, but I was like, man, I want to get some gaming in, man. I think I'm kind of hooked on Fortnite. I may or may not have a Fortnite problem. No Stadia for me, Ryan Landis.
Yeah, Ryan, I was a Stadia player, but I have since backed away from it just because it doesn't do what I need as a travel solution anymore. Yeah. But I will always say there were very viable reasons for that technology. There still are, and in fact, that technology pushed the industry in a certain direction that we're seeing the fruits of today. Right, so I don't. One thing I will say is I don't necessarily jump in the bucket of Stadia is a failure and it should have never existed. It did some specific things that I think are good for our industry overall.
Yeah, I heard it worked pretty well too for streaming service.
For me, it actually worked great. I mean, and not only here where I'm sitting on my 1 gigabit per second, right, FiOS connection, but also, when I would go and play it on hotel Wi-Fi, right, and play racing games, which obviously are very subject to problems of latency and fidelity of signal, and it was a great performing solution for me. Other people, right, had problems with it. Yeah. I think people who don't understand networking would try and use it in ways that I probably wouldn't have recommended. But but again, tons of people were on that bandwagon of like anti-Stadia, anti-Google, which I think the truth in the analysis should have was a lot more even-handed if you would have gone to the right source.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm like I said, I'm hooked on playing Fortnite right now. Never thought I'd ever say that in my wildest imaginations. I want to thank Slow-Mo Backslap for that. He's the one that got me on Fortnite, and I was playing last night, so that's why we do the rant. And then I don't know, we were talking Game Logic. I'm like, dude, I'm ready to rant. So grab my cup of coffee and fired up the good old PC. So, but no, I want to thank everyone for hanging out with us as well. Please hit that like button if you're new to the show. Subscribe. Hit the bell notifications so you're alerted when we go live. And you can catch myself, Game Logic, B Money, Slow-Mo Backslap, Gaming Forte. Big shout out to Gaming Forte who popped in for a little bit. You can catch all of us Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you again, late. Yeah, go ahead, man.
So, Brad, can I squeeze in one? Just because actually at the close of the show, we're asking some questions about Stadia, and I do want to answer because I just want to flesh it out a little bit more than I was able to type. So, Ryan Landis is asking, what do they do? What is Stadia doing now? Are they pivoting? And I dropped a thing in the chat where I said, so they're making it more of a matter of a platform for developers to utilize in order to push their content, right? And so, what you will see over time is, right, developers and publishers who want to have cloud-enabled games will put them on the Stadia technology, but you won't see it labeled and branded as a Stadia game. The thing that I wanted to mention that I didn't have time to add into the chat is there are other vendors out there that are doing the same thing. So you look at the vendor that Nintendo is aligned with, right, in order to support their cloud games where part of the game is being delivered to you and is running to you on console, but other content is being streamed in, is another play that another vendor is making. And so those types of technologies will become another market vector for different vendors. And that will be more of the space that Stadia will be competing in. Where they're going to have a lot of traction because all that stuff is built on the Google backbone. And so, it has a kind of massively overwhelming competitive advantage to others who may be who may be having to procure, right, their cloud backbone to enable those technologies.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for sharing that, Game Logic, because that's been a kind of a valid question, like a question a lot of people have been asking is what's next for Stadia. So, no, thank you for that insight. Definitely appreciate it. Look, everyone, enjoy the rest of the weekend. Have fun playing video games. Maybe hop on some Fortnite with your good old buddy BRAP. And we'll be back on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Look for me on TV tomorrow night. I'll be at Monday Night Raw. I might be on TV. So check that out. But thank you again, everyone. Appreciate it. And we'll catch you Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're out.